In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold. The Abracast. Occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Abracast. I'm your host, Dr. John Towers. We have a disturbing episode lined up for this evening. It's something that, we've talked about, sort of the, dark forces, spiritual combat. We've done a ton of episodes about Genesis and Exodus, and we're kind of be skipping to the Revelations this evening. Well, we got a couple stops to make before we get there. Pre-flight checklist. I got my vessel of the art with my formula for my weapon of mass distraction, the Jinn Jihad, the famed Jinn Jihad here. And I got my vape pen here, so let's get this party started, and we're going to get it started in a weird way, and, so, Jinn Jihad, vape pen, and a random, Batman clip.
Took me 3 weeks to get a reservation here, and I had to tell him I worked for the government.
Really?
The city health inspector's not afraid to pull strings.
Rachel. Fancy that.
Yeah, Bruce. Fancy that.
Yeah. Rachel, Natasha, Rachel.
Natasha, are you the
prima ballerina for the Moscow Ballet?
Wow. Harvey's taking me next week.
Really? So, you're into ballet?
Bruce, this is Harvey Dent.
The famous Bruce Wayne. Rachel's told me everything about you.
I certainly hope not. So, let's put a couple tables together.
I'm not sure that they'll let us.
Oh, they should. I own the place.
How could you want to raise children in a city like this?
Well, I was raised here. I turned out okay.
Is Wayne Manor in the city limits?
The Palisades? Sure. As our new DA, you might want to figure out where your jurisdiction ends.
I'm talking about the kind of city that idolizes a masked vigilante.
Gotham City is proud of an ordinary citizen standing up for what's right.
Gotham needs heroes like you, elected officials, not a man who thinks he is above the law.
Exactly. Who appointed the Batman?
We did. All of us who stood by and let scum take control of our city.
But this is a democracy, Harvey.
When their enemies were at the gates, the Romans would suspend democracy and appoint one man to protect the city. And it wasn't considered an honor, it was considered a public service.
Harvey, the last man that they appointed to protect the Republic was named Caesar, and he never gave up his power.
Okay, fine. You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Look, whoever the Batman is, he doesn't want to do this for the rest of his life. How could he? Batman is looking for someone to take up his mantle.
Someone like you, Mr. Dent?
Maybe. If I'm up to it.
What if Harvey Dent is the Caped Crusader?
If I were sneaking out every night, someone would have
So
noticed
this is
by now.
kind of the question I'm asking as we're getting into this topic, into this question. I'm kind of asking, are we living long enough to become this this villain that Harvey Dent's talking about? And this all seems pretty weird and esoteric. Like, hey, I'm trying to listen to an episode. I'm trying to listen to this drunk guy talk about the Bible. What's he doing playing Batman clips? So here, let's just get into it. So I'm sure I've mentioned it before. My dad was a non-practicing Catholic and my mom was a Southern Baptist. So it was hellfire and brimstone every other Sunday. And I would listen to, guys not unlike Pastor Larry Solomon, for those of you who've listened to the show for a long time, talk about, Revelation and the beast with the 10 horns and the horrors of Babylon and all this stuff. And, later on in life, when you look at Revelations, you're like, where is America at and all this stuff? And I guess I kind of just, I don't want to say I hid behind the idea, but it didn't occur to me that we are, like, America is in Revelation. It's just in there a way that I certainly wasn't expecting. And, a lot of this kind of thought that led me here, I've been reading Andy Jacobson's, I read Nuclear War, the scenario, which scared the living shit out of me. And again, the time when I was growing up was all about nuclear war. It's the waning days of the Cold War and everybody was worried about it. And I mean, it left such an impression on me. There's a mushroom cloud on the cover of my graphic novel called The Jin Jihad. And, there's at least one mushroom cloud in the set of tarot cards the deck of tarot cards I designed. So it's like something that's lingering with me. And so after I read Nuclear War, everyone should read it, by the way. Everyone should read it. If you're playing on... God, let me just stop. Everyone should read it. It's terrifying in its implication. But I started reading other Annie Jacobson books, and right now I'm working my way through the one about Operation Paperclip, and I'm thinking maybe this was it. Like, this is when we started going downhill, when we start making this deal with all these Nazis that did, nowadays in like pop culture or whatever, when you hear Paperclip, you think, oh, well, they're just the guys that came over to help NASA, like, with the space program. But, like, nah, bro, nah, it's not like that. They did come over to help with the space program, but also people that did weird pressurization experiments on humans, aka Jews, in prison camps and concentration camps, that also helped the NASA and, high altitude flight and pressure suits and all of that stuff, chemical warfare, biological stuff, putting nuclear warheads on missiles and rockets, like all that came from these Nazis. And I think, like, what if that was our heel turn, or that was like the beginning of our heel turn, to use a wrestling whatever vernacular. But maybe that's the thing that's been rotting at us since like the fucking 50s, man. So what am I bitching about already? I can't get on track. That was the deal that led us. That was the sell your soul moment, and now all the fiddling's over. So here we go to the book of our Revelations. Maybe Pastor Larry Solomon will actually make an appearance tonight. Babylon, the prostitute on the beast, Revelation 17. One of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and said to me, "Come, and I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits by many waters. With her, the kings of earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries. And then the angel carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness, and there I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast." Is it Katy Perry? Maybe. "That was covered with the blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns, and the woman was dressed in a purple and scarlet and was glittering with gold, precious stones, and pearls. She held up a golden cup in her hand, filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. The name written on her forehead was a mystery. Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth. I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of God's holy people, the blood of those who bore testimony to a Jesus. When I saw her, I was greatly astonished, and the angel said to me, "Why are you astonished? I will explain to you the mystery of the woman and of the beast she rides, which has 7 heads and 10 horns, and the beast which you saw once was, now is not, and yet will come up out of the abyss and go to its destruction. The inhabitants of the earth, whose names have been written in the book of life, form the creation of the world, and will be astonished when they see the beast, because it was once, now is not, and yet will come." This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are the 7 hills on which the woman sits. There will be 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come. But when he does come, he must remain for only a little while. The beast who once was and now is not, the 8th king, he belongs to the 7 and is going to his destruction. The 10 horns you saw are the 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but who for 1 hour will receive authority as king as along with this beast. They have one purpose and will give their power and authority to the beast. They will wage war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will triumph over them because he is Lord, the lords, and the kings of kings. And with him will be his called, chosen, and faithful followers. And then the angel said to me, "The waters you saw where the prostitute sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, languages. The beast and the 10 horns you saw will hate the prostitute. They will bring her to ruin and leave her naked, and they will eat her flesh and burn her with fire, for God has put it in their hearts to accomplish his purpose by agreeing to hand over the beast and the royal authority until God's words are fulfilled. The woman you saw is a great city that rules over the kings of earth." And after this, I saw another angel coming down from heaven and had great authority, and the earth was illuminated by his splendor. With a mighty voice he shouted, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling for demons and a haunt for every impure spirit. A haunt for every unclean bird, a haunt for every unclean and detestable animal. For all the nations have drunk the maddening wine of her adulteries, and the kings of the earth committed adultery with her, and the merchants of the earth grew rich from her excessive luxuries." And then I heard another voice from heaven say, "Come out of her, my people, so that you will not share in her sins, so that you will not receive any of her plagues. For her sins are piled up to heaven, and God has remembered her crimes, and give back to her as she was given. Pay her back double for what she has done, and pour her a double portion from her own cup, and give her as much torment and grief as the glory and luxury she gave herself. In her heart she boasts, 'I sit enthroned as queen. I am not a widow. I will never mourn.' Therefore, in one day her plagues will overtake her, death, mourning, and famine. She will be consumed by fire, for mighty is the Lord God who judges her. When the kings of the earth who committed adultery with her and shared her luxury see the smoke of her burning, they will weep and mourn over her, terrified at her torment. They will stand far off and cry, "Woe, woe to you, great city, you mighty city of Babylon! In 1 hour your doom has come. In 1 hour your doom has come. The merchant of the earth will weep and mourn over her because no one buys their cargo anymore. Cargoes of gold, silver, precious stones, and pearls, fine linens, purple silks, scarlet cloths, every sort of citron wood, and articles of every kind made of ivory, costly wood, bronze, iron, and marble, cargoes of cinnamon and spice and incense, myrrh and frankincense, of wine and olive oil and fine flour and wheat and cattle and sheep, horses, carriages, and human beings sold as slaves. Yet they will say, the fruit you longed for is gone from you. All your luxury, splendor have vanished, never to be recovered. The merchants who sold these things and gained their wealth from her will stand far off, terrified at her torment, and they will weep and mourn and cry out, "Woe, woe to you, great city, dressed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, the glittering with gold, precious stones, and pearls. In 1 hour such great wealth has been brought to ruin." 1 hour. That's all it takes for a great city, whether it's shining on the hill or not. Every sea captain and all who travel by ship, the sailors and all who earn their living from the sea will stand far off. And when they see the smoke of her burning, they will exclaim, "Was there ever a city like this great city? Was there ever a city like this great city?" They will throw dust on their heads, and with the weepings and mournings they will cry out, "Woe, woe to you, great city, where all who had ships on the sea became rich through her wealth. In 1 hour she is brought to ruin. Rejoice over her, you heavens. Rejoice, your people of God. Rejoice, apostles and prophets, for God has judged her, and the judgment she imposes upon you." Then a mighty angel picked up a boulder the size of a large millstone and threw it into the sea. And he said, hold on, wait a minute. I'm trying to decide if I want to get into this or not. I just noticed something here. That she was drunk with abominations. Her cup filleth over with abominations and filth. People sold into slavery. And this verse here where he talks about the size of a large millstone, this came up a few months ago, maybe a year ago now. We were talking about a movie, and there's a Bible verse in the movie where if you basically, when you fuck around with children, you might as well just put a millstone around your neck and jump into the water. Here we got waters and millstones and people sold into slavery. With such violence, the great city of Babylon will be thrown down, never to be found again. The music of harpists and musicians, pipers and trumpeters will never be heard in you again. No worker of any trade will ever be found in you again. The sound of a millstone will never be heard in you again. The sound of industry, the light of a lamp will never shine in you again. The voice of a bridegroom and a bride will never be heard in you again. Your merchants were the world's important people. By your magic spell, all the nations were led astray, and in her was found the blood of the prophets and of God's holy people, all who have been slaughtered on earth. After this, I heard what sounded like a roar of a great multitude in heaven, shouting, Hallelujah! Salvation and glory and power belong to our God, for true, just as his judgments. He has condemned the great prostitute, who corrupted the earth by her adulteries. He has avenged her, the blood of his servants, and then shouted again, Hallelujah! The smoke from her goes up forever and ever. 24 elders and 4 living creatures fell down and worshipped God, who was seated on the throne, and they cited Amen, Hallelujah, and a voice came from the throne saying, Praise our God, all his servants, you who fear him, both great and small. And I heard what sounded like a great multitude, like the roar of rushing water, and like loud peals of thunder, shouting, Hallelujah, for our God Almighty reigns, and let us rejoice and be glad and give him glory, for the wedding of the Lamb has come, and his bride had made herself ready, and fine linen and bright and clean was given her to wear. And then the angel said to me, Write this, Blessed are those who are invited to the wedding supper of the Lamb. And he added, These are the true words of God. And at this I fell at his feet to worship him. But he said to me, Don't do that. We don't do that here. I am a fellow servant with you and with your brothers and sisters who hold to the testimony of Jesus and worship God. For it is the spirit of prophecy who bears testimony to Jesus. It's been a while since I've done something like that. That was nice. Here's time for this. So Revelation, we're to this other article. There's a link in the notes if you want to look at it. Revelation 17:1 through 19:4 is placed between the narrative of the seventh bowl and the narrative of the second Advent, because the entire world system created by Babylon the Great will be judged at the second event. However, Revelation 17:1 through 19:4 is a topical unit, not a narrative unit. The introduction of Babylon the Great and the description of its fall are dramatically placed just before the final judgment. Yet when the final judgment is universal, the destruction of Babylon the Great is a targeted judgment which occurs at an early stage of the tribulation period. A study of Revelation 17:1 through 19:4, which I just read to you, shows the Babylon the Great is the world's great superpower in the end time. The following facts emerge from an analysis of this section of the book of Revelations. Babylon the Great has the largest economy of any entity in the world. It is the center of wealth in the world, and it is responsible for an extended period of global wealth creations in the end times. Babylon the Great has shaped global culture in the end in a directly anti-Christian manner. Babylon the Great has the greatest political power of any entity in the end times. Babylon the Great is considered to have the strongest military in the world, not for long, of the end times. All of these characteristics uniquely and definitively match the United States of America. For exegetical details, see the larger paper. I contemplated doing a whole series on this bit with the larger paper, but I'm not going to do it. I should have just not read it and not fucked up my whole flow. Back to it. Sorry, back to it. Most commentators assume, based on the use of the Greek word polis, which references to Babylon the Great. The Babylon the Great is a city, not a large nation-state composed of many cities, towns, and villagers. However, city is only one possible meaning of the word polis. The lexicon LSJ gives country, state, and community as other possible meanings, with numerous examples from classical Greek. In fact, polis, where the normal word for state in extra-biblical Greek, and typically carried political implications. It is hard to think of a better term that the angel could have used to describe the United States, the Great Polis. It's obviously translated to Greek. I'm not trying to sound through all this fucking hieroglyphics. The term nation generally denotes a racial or ethnic group, and there is no American race. The term kingdom encompasses all domains ruled by a state, not just the state itself, which in this case of Babylon the Great could refer to the entire earth. The term king would create confusion as to whether a nation or its leader is in view, and is not the normal Greek term for a political entity. The term country refers to a tract of land or a district and does not carry political implications. Thus, there is no better term in the Greek lexicon to describe modern sovereign states other than polis. The Great Babylon the Great is a world homegen, like homogeny, the country which dominates the world, politics, economics, culture in the end times. Further, the text of Revelations indicates that it is a unique entity in the world. The Great Polis, it uniquely makes all of the nations of the world wealthy, reigns over all of the nations of the world, imposes its culture on the nations, and leads them into a massive downward spiral of materialistic depravity that culminates in worldwide worship of Satan and the Antichrist during the second half of the tribulation period. These are things that can only be done once. The United States is now doing them. Never before in history has a single country dominated all other countries for the world, and enjoyed such preeminence in comparison to all of the others. The United States finds itself in the historically unique position of monopolizing every significant power source in the world, a position it began to occupy since the end of World War II. Greatly enhanced by the end of the Cold War. In summary, the book of Revelation describes Babylon the Great as the dominant superpower in the world of the end times, so dominant that it actually shapes the culture and economy of the world as it exists at the start of the tribulation period. The nature and the scope of Babylon the Great's dominance is such that only such entity could ever exist in the history of the world, and there is no doubt the United States of America is this entity. While some aspects of the prophecy remain to be fulfilled, most notably the prophecy of Babylon the Great attempts to put Christians to death worldwide, enough aspects already match as to leave no doubt as to the fulfillment of the rest. So let me just give this person credit. Truth Only Bible, about the Bible, Christianity, and current events. Dr. Steven Anderson wrote this when July 2021. This guy's ahead of the curve, I think. This guy is ahead of the curve. But I'm sure I'm not the first dude that thought of this. I never thought I was. But we do have more to get through. And we're running out of time. So we got to fit this in. Or they'll just put these commercials in wherever the fuck they want. So it's better for me to plan them, even though they're inconvenient, right? I apologize. Alright, where am I at? Where we're jumping to now, bro? Deuteronomy 7. You don't hear me do Deuteronomy very much. That's hilarious. For they will turn your children away from following me to serve other gods, and the Lord's anger will burn against you and will quickly destroy you. Here we go. This is what you are to do to them. Break down their altars, and this is God. I should have set this up a little bit better. This is God talking to the Israelites. All right. So, he's advising them what to do to their enemies. This is going to bite me so hard. This is what you are due to do to them. Break down their altars and smash their sacred stones and cut down their Asherah poles and burn their idols in the fire. For you are a people holy to the Lord, your God. And the Lord your God has chosen you out of all the peoples on the face of the earth to be his people, his treasured possession. The Lord did not set his affection on you or choose you because you were more numerous than the other people, for you were the fewest of all people. But it was because the Lord loved you and kept the oath he swore to your ancestors, and he brought you out with a mighty hand and redeemed you from that land of slavery for the power of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Know therefore the Lord your God is God, and he is a faithful God, keeping his covenant of love to 1,000 generations of those who love him and keep his commandments. Those who hate him will repay to their face by destruction. He will not be slow to repay to their face those who hate him. So there you go, Deuteronomy 7. What did I do? Where did I start? 4, I guess, 7:4 through 11. For those of you guys who are following at home. All right, so you're like, Dr. Towers, what is all this about? I think I'm building a pretty good case here, so let me just continue and maybe I'll answer your question. This is from fucking Time magazine, which isn't, I don't think, around anymore. Like, there's not like an actual magazine at the rack. I don't think. That's how relevant it is. But it used to be a big, I believe, CIA-funded fucking thing, mind control to steer Americans how they want. I don't have any documentation to prove that. That's just my thought. You know, we have people in all of the newsrooms that count. Here we go. Go listen to Project Mockingbird episodes back in the catalog. You might actually have to go to the Red Vault for those. Anyhow, TimeMagazine.com, growing anti-Semitism among young Americans. This is from Jonathan Greenblatt, March 21st, 2024. So, you know, not too distant past. Over the course of post-war America, there's been a march of progress in which institutional and societal prejudice among minority groups, from women to African Americans and LGBTQ community, lessens the opportunity open. Lessons and opportunities open. This too has been the case for the Jewish community. No longer are there covenants restricting where Jewish families can live, or quotas blocking admissions to universities. Jews have ascended to the very heights of academia, philanthropy, business, labor, entertainment, and politics. Unfortunately, we are backsliding, not in accomplishments, but in acceptance. Navigate negative attitudes about the Jews and negative experiences for Jews by every metric are growing, not fading, and most troubling, anti-Semitism for the first time is growing among the younger generations of Americans, portending a very different and dark future for the American Jewish community. Does it make it? Do you see the picture I'm painting? From 1964, ADL has regularly conducted a comprehensive study of anti-Semitic attitudes. And time after time, we reliably found that anti-Semitism was strongest among older Americans and weaker among younger. This made intuitive sense, as younger people would generally be more accepting, and as they aged, anti-Semitism would, I interject, should fade, if it's there at all. In ADL's most recent survey, however, we found this trend has reversed when asked the extent to which they agreed with 11 different classic anti-Jewish tropes. Millennials now lead the way, harboring the most anti-Semitic views with belief in 5.37 different tropes on average, following by members of Gen Z at 5.01. The youngest generation now outpaced Gen X at 4.19. The baby boomers at 3.06. Such tropes include allegations of dual loyalty, conspiracy about Jewish control of the media and the weather, I put that in there, and Wall Street. Others or believe that Jews are insular or irritating. This upsurge in anti-Semitism among the younger generations is driving an overall jump in anti-Semitic attitudes. In 2014, our study found that only 9% of Americans harbored extensive anti-Semitic views. That is, 6 of the 11 attitudes were tested. That jumped to 20% in 2022. Today, that figure stands at 24%. When nearly 1 in 4 hold intolerant attitudes towards Jews, anti-Semitism can no longer be considered a fringe belief. What we are witnessing is a normalization of anti-Semitism across the society. On On the right, white nationals and other extremists are emboldened as mainstream politicians and public figures extol the Great Replacement theory, which posits that Jews are orchestrating illegal immigration to replace white Americans, and bemoan the influence of globalists who control everything from American politics to economy to even the weather. I mentioned the weather thing. Yeah, so unless this next paragraph is going to be equally as big, talking about letting terrorists in the country, marching in pro-Palestinian protests, throwing shoes at people, I don't know. On the left, especially after the Hamas attack of October 7th, there has been a surge in anti-Semitism, which its proponents claim is just anti-Zionism. That's it. We get one sentence this is fair and balanced, everybody. This is Time Magazine. Makes me want to throw up. Anyhow, but let's just take it at face value. So there are some, first of all, white nationalists. There's no Nazis on the right. Nazi actually means National Socialist, so whatever. Let's just say there are 5 guys in Idaho in a shack somewhere that think of this. Fine. We'll just put that into the formula, right? Because I'm here painting a picture. We'll just put that on the color palette. Along with, anti-Zionism. False claims of anti-Zionism. We'll put that on the palette too. So let's just move forward. It's not a left and a right thing. I tried to keep that in my brain. It's not a left and a right thing. Okay. This will help out. This will make me be a lot clearer. The ADL tracked 3,291 anti-Semitic incidents in the U.S. in just 3 months following October 7. That's 361% increase over the same period of the previous year. These include bomb threats to Jewish schools, synagogue mobs harassing Jewish students on college campuses, and physical assaults around rallies. I noticed they don't mention any synagogue shootings. This mirrors a seismic shift by the younger generation in their views on Israel. Today, 17% of Gen Z agrees with the anti-Zionist ideas that the solution to the Israel-Palestinian conflict should be the termination of the state of Israel. Whoa. 17% of Gen Z agrees that the solution to the Israel-Palestinian conflict should be the termination of the state of Israel. That is wild to me. I can't compare to just 2% of baby boomers. Our survey also discovered that more than a quarter of Americans and more than half of Gen Z would find it at least somewhat acceptable for a close friend or a family member to support Hamas. Terrorist groups that on October 7th used rape as a weapon, murdered children in front of their parents, carried off civilian hostages, which we still don't have back, including babies and the elderly. I'm sure they're fine. I mean, what can they be doing to babies and the elderly? Let's be clear, anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. They must have got like the one sane person to write this. Anti-Zionism doesn't mean taking issue with the action policy of Israel's government, but it does mean support for a Palestinian state. Anti-Zionism is a belief that Jews alone among the peoples of the world do not equally deserve freedom and self-determination in their homeland. It is the ideology of negation and a form of discrimination that treats Jews as a people much the same way that bigots treat individual Jews for those who believe that Israel's existence doesn't matter. Surely Jewish lives don't matter either. Anti-Zionism subverts the modern views of justice and oppression by imbuing them with classic anti-Jewish tropes. It harnesses widespread misinformation about Jewish history, deep-seated prejudice against Jews to build a simplistic framework through which anti-Semites can mask their hate, and anti-Zionism somehow think that it's possible to adamantly oppose the existence of the world's only Jewish state, in which half of the world's Jews live and yet have no problem with Jews. This is evident in the data. On a basic level, those who hold anti-Zionist positions are more likely to believe historic anti-Jewish tropes. Thinking that Jews don't have the right to independent country makes one 3.7 times more likely than the average. Sorry about that, Jesus. An average American to find themselves in the top quartile of anti-Jewish trope belief, believing that the Israel lobby is disproportionately influential in the U.S. government, makes one 7.5 times more likely than the average American to end up in the top quartile of anti-Jewish trope beliefs. The phenomenon are not as far apart as people might have led us to believe. These are statistically insignificant correlations. They are deeply related. So we'll do this, and then we'll wrap this up. I got another 2 articles to go, and if you want to read the rest of this, I'm stopping short. The link will be in the show notes. So we're going to jump drastically in what's going to seem like a weird spot, but just bear with me, because we're going to be talking about how quick these things happen, how fast we can go from, I don't know, a protest on outside DNC, ripping out fences and, whatever, to like a fucking like Holocaust sort of thing. They call it a pogrom. But just for a little bit of context, going into this, we're going to be going to the Army Heritage Center Foundation, armyheritage.org. And this ditty here is an introduction to the Russian Civil War. So as the World War I dragged on, the Russian people grew angry at the Tsar and his repressive government. In March 1917, the Russian people rose up in revolt. Tsar Nicholas II abdicated the throne, and a power struggle between moderate socialists and a group of hardcore revolutionary communists called the Bolsheviks began. The moderates won, formed a provisional government, and promised to continue fighting the war. Their reign, however, was destined to be brief. The Bolsheviks promised that they would make peace with Germany if they were in power. They gave Germans hope that Russia would drop out of the war. This would allow Germany to concentrate all of their troops against the British and the French on the Western Front. So the Germans came up with a plan to help the Bolsheviks. The leader of the Bolsheviks, Vladimir Lenin, was living in Switzerland in exile, and the Germans allowed him to travel through Germany to Russia on a special train they arranged for him. Back to Russia, Lenin joined in an open campaign with the leaders, including Trotsky, to overturn the moderate government. I can't remember what episode we would have talked about this on, but we have talked about this at some point. I don't know, in the last 500 hours of episodes. We told the story of the Germans sneaking Lenin back into Germany after his exile. I can't remember why. The Russian army was badly demoralized. The Bolsheviks recruited many soldiers to their cause. When Germany launched an attack on July 1917, thousands of Russian soldiers deserted their post. The Bolsheviks grew more powerful. In October 1917, they seized power, and the country they founded would eventually be called the Soviet Union, the USSR. Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or the Soviet Union. Lenin quickly made peace with the Central Powers. Many Russians, however, were unhappy with Lenin and the Bolsheviks, and before long, civil war broke out. The forces loyal to the Tsar, known as, this is important to remember, the forces loyal to the Tsar was known as the White Russians, and they fought against the communists, who were who? The Red Army. Russia, which had entered World War I as a troubled but powerful state, fell into chaos. The Allies were deeply concerned by these events. They wanted Russia back in the fight, and they wanted to stop the spread of communism. England and France decided to send troops to Russia to intervene in the Civil War and restore the Eastern Front. They convinced President Woodrow Wilson to include American soldiers in their plan. So, all of that to say that Russia is in the midst of a civil war against the White Russians and Red Russians. Now, we're leading into this portion of the episode. You know, the important part of it is how fast this can turn. It is like it's like a switch. It's like they flip the switch. 20 years before the Holocaust, pogroms killed 100,000 Jews, then were forgotten. This is called From the Times of Israel, written by Rich Torino, December 21st, 2021. In the early 1920s, thousands of Jewish child refugees flooded into Moscow from Ukraine. Feeling a terrifying series of pogroms, legendary Jewish artist Marc Chagall remembered giving art lessons to some of the refugees at a Jewish orphanage outside the Soviet capital. He recalled the horrifying atrocities they spoke about: their parents murdered, their sisters raped and slain, and the children themselves chased out in the cold, threadbare and starving. Unlike the Holocaust, this earlier wave of anti-Semitic violence has largely been forgotten in history. Yet at the time, it was front-page news. From 1918 to 1921, more than 1,100 pogroms killed over 100,000 Jews in the area. That is part of the present-day Ukraine. Such large-scale violence led to fears that 6 million Jewish lives across Europe were at risk from anti-Semitic hate. And those who made such dire predictions included writer Anatole France. Less than 20 years later, these fears were realized. The story of these faithful pogroms is chronicled in a new book. In the midst of civilized Europe, the pogroms of 1918 to 1921 and the onset of the Holocaust, a University of Michigan history and Judaic studies professor, Jeffrey Vedlinger. I think right now they are not very well known at all because they've been so suppressed by the Holocaust. Vedlinger told the Times of Israel in a phone interview, in the interwar period, they were very well known. In some ways, it seems like it was all anyone was writing about back then. Rooted in previous linguistics, hold on, I gotta click out of this box. Rooted in previous linguistics research project with the elderly Yiddish-speaking Jews in Ukraine, who told Vedlinger about surviving these pogroms, and the book takes his readers back to a disturbing moment in history during the Russian Civil War. It's terrifying and horrifying, Vedlinger said. It takes a toll on you to write down this testimony. I'm sure it takes a toll on the reader. It was difficult for me to hear and probably difficult for them to tell. The title phrase comes from France's fear for the future of European Jewry. The French poet and journalist noted that some of the pogroms occurred at the same time as peace talks at Versailles, tasked with ending World War I. One was perhaps the largest single mass murder of Jews in modern history up to that point. The pogrom of Proskuriv. I'm going to have to figure this out. Proskuriv. The pogrom of Proskuriv on February 14, 1991, with 911 listed deaths, which Windlinger estimates is 1/3 of the actual total. I think it was almost genocidal, Windlinger said, of the Proskuriv pogrom. It shows how the violence escalated during a very short period of time between November 1918 and February 1919. In addition to the testimonies Windlinger took in the current century, he accessed many more archives, including more contemporaneous accounts by survivors and aid workers, both Jewish and Christian, who sought to help them. Meanwhile, he found that the pogroms had many different perpetrators. This is the part that I thought was unbelievable. I mean, as unbelievable as this story already is. Meanwhile, he found the pogroms had many different perpetrators. Members of opposing red and white sides in the Russian Civil War each participated in violence, as did many Ukrainian and Polish soldiers and civilians, as well as, I love this, as well as local warlords. It was an intimate violence, Windlinger said. They often knew each other, particularly in small towns, particularly the violence of the warlords in local villages. Local vendettas were a big part of the pogroms. They definitely knew each other, remembered each other's years later, and it's why 20 years later the legacy of the pogroms was still very much being felt in these towns. Everybody remembered 20 years later when the perpetrators and who were the victims, because it was local. Many of these pogroms took place within former Russian Pale of Settlement, the region to which Jews were historically confined under the Tsars. This is weird too. Like, there's these steps to these genocides or these holocausts, and ghettoization is one of these steps, and that's what this sentence was just about. It had witnessed previous anti-Semitic violence, notably during the first decade of the 20th century, a period that included the notorious Kishinev pogrom of 1903 and further pogroms accompanying the revolution of 1905. World War I brought further anti-Semitic violence from Russia, army forces, both on the advance and in the retreat. After Russia exited the war, however, there was hope. The new government of Ukraine adopted a policy of remarkable tolerance towards Jews, with some of its currency even bearing Yiddish words, yet the central government policies were overshadowed by soldiers and public citizens who harbored hostility towards the country's Jews. Hostility that Windlinger describes as generational in some respect. More of a generational divide marked Ukraine than in neighboring Poland, he said. The younger generation had grown up in a war, tended to be more hostile to the Jews than the older generations in the time before the war. Hostility towards Jews would coalesce in the pogroms of 1918 to 1921. A chilling section of the book narrates 4 such pogroms in chronological order, including 2 separate outbreaks in the city of Zhytomyr. Collectively, they represent the multiple ways in which pogroms erupted from isolated events by disaffecting army units to a large-scale action involving more troops. A wider conflict erupted between the newly independent Ukraine, headed by journalist-turned-Cossack leader Simon Petliura, and forces claiming to represent the successor state of the Tsar. Jews got caught up in both ensuing violence following the outbreak of the Russian Civil War. Both communist and anti-communist force ravaged Ukraine's Jews through pogroms, including the Titiev, the site of March 1920 massacre, by rampaging whites over 10 days and particularly gruesome atrocities. The whites burned a group of Jews alive inside a synagogue. with one report estimating 1,127 dead. The book cites reporters of overall deaths from this pogrom to thousands. It was much worse than medieval cruelty, Wendlinger said of the synagogue set alight. It was actually like the Holocaust. Wendlinger also chronicles the situation in nearby Poland, where one of these early pogroms took place in Lemberg, now Lviv. In November 1918, Polish independence was established. The book describes the rape of Jewish women and girls and the destruction of Torah scrolls and the perpetrators of the pogrom, including Polish soldiers as well as civilians. The author describes pogroms against Jews in Poland as better documented at the time than those of the Ukraine. The conflict between both countries prevented one international investigator, an American Jew, Henry Montagu, a former United States ambassador to the Ottoman Empire, from accessing the war zone of Ukraine. The book cites controversial statements that he made later in his memoirs, such as describing some reports of the pogroms in Poland as exaggerated by the Jewish community leaders and blaming Zionism of the cause of the pogroms. The book addresses the complex subject of Jews taking revenge for pogroms in Ukraine. Following the Russian Revolution in 1917, Ukrainians often targeted Jews because they conflated them with communists, which was also the case in Poland. Wendlinger notes that many Bolshevik leaders and Jewish origins, most notably Leon Trotsky, who was born Lev Bronstein. It's hilarious. All these Russian communists all have aliases. It's phenomenal. I mean, it's great. It's just like Barry and Barack. Huh. All right, I can keep going. It goes on here. The link's going to be in the show notes. We're just going to wrap this sucker up. I'm John. This has been the Abracast, and tonight we are looking at the rise of the Babylon mystery. There's something else. It's going to be like that, though. We'll figure it out. Have a good evening. Be safe. We'll see you next week.
Are you interested in the occult, history, conspiracy, and violence? Learn more at Abracast.com and visit the storefront for tarot cards, merch, and books.
Support the show.
Get access to the show archive
at subscribestar.com. Thank you for listening to this episode. Send an email or visit us on social media to let us know what you think about this topic. And please remember to leave a 5-star rate and review.